we got some big news Wednesday in the NFL. Deebo Samuel, the do-everything wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers, has officially requested a trade from the San Francisco 49ers. This sounds like it could be money, it could be other things, but how did we end up here, in your opinion, between Samuel and the San Francisco 49ers?
I think we should call the 2019 draft the "I want to be traded" draft. Like and it's led by its leader in Kyler Murray, which we'll get to him in a minute, and then it morphins into some of these other players who haven't really been able to get the contracts that they think they deserve, certainly. And now we're hearing a lot of complaining going on. But I think the Samuel thing a lot of it is tied to Garoppolo. Look, I don't deny that the 49ers want to redo Samuel's deal. I think they have to. I mean, going through this new book, he's like Lenny Moore, who's in the Hall of Fame. Lenny Moore, Femi, played running back and wide receiver for the Baltimore Colts. And he didn't do it. He lined up at receiver. He lined up at running back. And, I mean, there'd be games where he would carry the ball quite a bit. And this kid is as a dynamic, maybe not as fast, which is why he didn't go until the second round, but he still is dynamic. And I think because of that, and he's watching the landscape of the league and he's saying, where's my coin? And he deserves it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He's probably their most valuable player on offense there for the 49ers. He's surpassed George Kittle, in my opinion, in terms of his value. And here's what John Lynch had to say, the 49ers GM, earlier this offseason at the Combine, on the importance and what Deebo Samuel means to their team.
Herm Edwards used to tell me, you can be special when you have that skill and then you have that elite will. And I think when you watch Deebo play, that's what I see. And it's inspiring. It lifts everyone. And I think we get the same thing in our meetings. Who's the player you try to play like? I mean, we even have defensive players saying Deebo. And I think that speaks volumes for who he is.
I mean, Michael, when you hear John Lynch say that to the media, I mean, it sounds like inspiring, and he's the face of what they would like the model 49er player to be. Why don't they just break the bank and give him his money?
Well, I think they're tied up in the cap right now. And, the one thing I think that they've seen is this market has gone crazy and players are reacting to it. And it's a very volatile market. And, Cooper Kupp wants to get paid just like everybody else. The other guy in that 19 draft we didn't talk about is A.J. Brown. He wants to get paid. DK Metcalf, he wants to get paid. So there's so many guys that are looking to get paid from that draft that, I don't know how the Niners don't. I would think, to me, the way I would describe Deebo would be completely different than Lynch. I think this is a player who is more effective with the ball in his hand than he is as a receiver. I think his receiving, running routes are not what you would say, oh my gosh, but the way they utilize him on slants and inside patterns and then being able to tackle him are all problems. I mean, this is a kid who led the state in South Carolina in kickoff returns in high school. He's a hard dude to tackle. Same thing with A.J. Brown. They're hard to tackle. They may not be as hard to cover, but they're hard to tackle. And I think that his competitive fiber, when he has the ball in his hands, separates them, and certainly he makes them a better team, and especially considering that they want to throw the ball in the middle of the field. Their passing game is from the numbers in. I mean, they're not an outside the numbers passing game. They want to run play action and throw the ball between the hash marks, and this is where he succeeds so well. I don't see how they're going to be able to replace him. I mean, but they're carrying Garoppolo. I'm told this reliably. Like at the owners' meetings, Kyle Shanahan is asking other teams, like, why aren't you interested in Garoppolo? He's better than what you have, and they don't want to give Garoppolo away. And Garoppolo is certainly valuable, maybe not to Amal Shah on our network, but he is valuable. And yet, they don't want to have to just give him away. And I think ultimately that being tied up is what's creating the issue. Of course, all these other contracts too.
Yeah, and you mentioned Garoppolo. One of the things that's tying it up is the shoulder surgery that he just had earlier in the offseason. We don't know when he'll be cleared to throw and participate in training camp. So that could be a thing that maybe gives teams a little bit of pause for Jimmy Garoppolo. But one of the things that's interesting to me about Deebo Samuel is that we've talked about the money, but it sounds like it might not just be money, that the usage and how the 49ers have used him could also be factoring into this, because I saw these stats earlier from Next Gen Stats. First 33 games of his career, he was in the backfield, lined up in the backfield 2.1% of the time, out wide 72.4% of the time. The last 11 games, Michael, in the backfield 21% of the time, out wide 53% of the time. They moved him around in the slot and tight formations as well. Is that sustainable? I mean, Deebo Samuel, it sounds like he doesn't want to be taking those running back kind of hits, and that's almost being used against him. Do you think that the Niners could tweak how they use Deebo Samuel, or is this something that they just kind of have to use him in that wide back role that they've been using him over the last 11 games?
Well, I mean, look, I think it's something they fell into, right? So he starts off his career, he's got 14 carries his first year. The next year, he only has 8. He only plays in 5. He only starts 5 games. I mean, durability has been somewhat of an issue for him. And then last year was the watershed moment where all of a sudden he just turned everything around. Carries the ball 59 times, averages 6.2 yards a carry. So it changed, and he gets 8 touchdowns rushing. I mean, he has more touchdowns rushing. I think that would be a great quiz. Did he have more touchdowns rushing or more touchdowns pass catching? He had more rushes, 8 to 6. So, he's been able to dominate from that running back. And I think probably when he's looking at his longevity, he's saying, look, I'm a multidimensional guy, which is fascinating because Tyreek Hill, I thought, was going to get used much like they used Deebo. I thought that he was going to, when he left Oklahoma State, he was a dynamic running back. Dynamic. I mean, he was great as a running back. I never saw him as a slot receiver that Andy Reid did. Then they moved him out, and now he's an all-time receiver. But to me, this kid showed flashes of doing something that they kind of layered themselves into. I don't know if he could be upset about it because it certainly makes him more valuable. He's a weapon. I mean, he averaged 18-2 a catch last year.
Yeah.
Ben, I mean, and a lot of that is we know they're not throwing deep routes down there. They don't have a drop-back pass game. So they're throwing play action, and it's yards after the catch. And those 18-7 are yards after the catch that he's gaining. He's gaining those yards. So to me, I don't know how they don't sign him. I really don't. I don't know how you could look at him and say, okay, he shouldn't be one of the top players. I know we got Devontae Adams' contract. We got Hill. Hopkins' contract still resonates up there on average per year. But this is a young kid entering his 4th year, and the same thing's going to happen. And the number one leader in the clubhouse on all this is going to be Kyler Murray. He is going to be the guy who changes perhaps the 19 draft because he's not coming to camp. He's holding out, and I think he wants to move himself away from the Cardinals, and I don't think he's going to change his tune.
Thanks for watching the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, and for more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to VSiN Live and the GM Shuffle podcast with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN, wherever you get your podcasts.